Stow, Massachusetts, a town 23 miles west of Boston, just exclaims her rich history throughout the settling and founding of the country. Stow's men marched proudly in wars, were among those attending constitutional conventions, laid out the town's roads, led the local government, and voted at town meetings. Historical writings, whether town or county, recorded the men's prominence. Women's names were etched in the documents as among the school teachers. For a town which valued education and had daily newspapers delivered first by coach and arriving in the mail, Stow's women remained in the shadows. Where was the suffrage movement? In Harriet H. Robinson's 1881 book, Massachusetts in the Women's Suffrage Movement, a general political, legal, and legislative history from 1774 to 1881, she noted that a reformer is the Rip Van Winkle in the history of his time. Without an authentic record of the women's suffrage movement, the coming generation might forget its early workers. The suffrage movement had been prominent in the Massachusetts news since 1850. The large scrapbook kept by Stow's Susan Proctor Lawrence, Stow's schoolteacher and first Randall librarian, featured pasted news articles and political cartoons which were important to her between 1896 to 1920. Suffrage and temperance were topics of significance to her. How could it be that suffrage movement passed Stow by? With the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment in 2020, it was time to put on detective hats. The story just had to be there, floating just under the surface. With all historical investigation, a researcher watches for clues, words, images, documents, and reflections that will coax out the beginning of a story. It could be a single moment which will bring life to the past. What a journey it was for the Stow Historical Society as women's voices began to be heard in the local newspaper, the Hudson News Enterprise, in their own writings, in family recollections, and in a 1918 photo. Stow's story became stories within stories as the forgotten 171 Stow women who registered to vote in 1920 came to life. The first clue was located on Ancestry.com when Warren family names were included in a listing of Xerox photo records for September 1920, Stow, Massachusetts. When had Stow's voting ledgers been scanned? Where were these ledgers in the town vault? Searching again, the oversized bound book of ledgers was located lying flat with books stacked high on top of it, its red spine facing the wall. Most of the pages were voter registrations for men between 1884 and 1919. After skimming through 37 pages of men's names, there was a single page which listed 7 women who registered on October 30th. No year was recorded. Wait, all the women's ages corresponded with the year 1895. Amazing. This was the first year women were permitted to vote along with men on non-binding referendum to gauge public opinion on enfranchising women in municipal elections. The referendum was soundly defeated. To add perspective to this discovery, the October 31, 1895 issue of the Concord Enterprise, under the heading of South Acton, stated that 5 brave ladies of this village faced the registrars last Tuesday night, answered the usual questions, and are now qualified to vote on Election Day on the question of women's suffrage. One might have described Stow's 7 women who registered to vote in 1895 as determined. Let's meet 3 of them: Susan Gates Peck, Susan Proctor Lawrence, and Elizabeth Gillespie Bolum. Susan Gates Peck's name was crossed out when she died in 1922.
This is Marilyn Zavorsky reading about Susan Ann Gates Peck, 1841 to 1922. Susan Ann Gates was a direct descendant of Thomas Gates, 1648 to 1726, the proprietor of lot number 11 of the new plantation of Pompasiticate in 1681. Born in Stow, Susan inherited the Gates farm on Great and Harvard Roads, but with a proviso that it couldn't be sold during her lifetime. She was a determined, strong, and vocal woman. Susan was a saver, and her treasures and those of her extended family continued to be enjoyed in the 21st century. Widowed in 1873 with 2 young children and expecting the third, Susan had to go to probate court to petition to sell some of the woodlots that were not part of the contiguous farmland in order to raise money to live on. Until her son Samuel was old enough to run the farm, she had tenant farmers come in to keep the farm running and provide a little income. Susan Gate Peck and her children, John, Samuel, and Willina, all attended Stow's West School on Harvard Road. Willina Peck, a West School scholar, studied at Wilbraham Academy, graduating from Women's Medical College, Baltimore, in 1900. Susan's great-grandson, John H. Peck, wrote in December 2019, "She certainly would have registered to vote because she was a political person. Her sons and daughter were also political people who instilled in their offspring, none for Willina, the sense of duty to vote Republican. I'm sure she was instrumental in having her daughter-in-law, Lillian Lewis, registered to vote as well. Lillian's sister, Lena and Jussie, were not married, but they were certainly in tune with the suffrage movement."
Hello, I'm Dorothy Sonicson, Packard Road. Today I'm reading about Elizabeth Gillespie Bolum, 1851 to 1923. Elizabeth Gillespie, born in Paisley, Scotland, arrived at Ellis Island with her mother and sister in 1857. They went to live in Malden, where her father worked in a mill. In 1879, she married George Bolum, a coachman, who was a naturalized citizen. They arrived in Stow, most likely in the late 1880s, and bought a farm on Sudbury Road near Lake Boone. The Methodist Episcopal Church in Gleasondale anchored them to their new home. Elizabeth was tirelessly involved with the citizens of Gleasondale through the church. Active in all the church's societies, Elizabeth was also the superintendent of the primary department of the Sunday school. She was also a Stow Grange lecturer. Elizabeth was the shopkeeper of the Bolum department store and cafe on Lake Boone. Her obituary stated, "She was a woman of fine mind and always interested in all that was going on in the world."
Bruce Fletcher, reading about Susan M. Proctor Lawrence. Susan M. Proctor Lawrence, 1846 to 1927. Susan M. Proctor was born in Carlisle and began teaching at West School at the age of 16. In 1864, she married Sergeant Samuel A. Lawrence in Stow while he was home on furlough during the Civil War. She and Samuel lived in the former home of her father-in-law, J.W. Lawrence, on Gleasondale Road. Before being appointed the first librarian at the Stow's new Randall Library in 1894, she had raised 2 children and taught in Stow schools for over 25 years. Continuously involved in town affairs, Susan was the Stow weekly correspondent for the Hudson News Enterprise for untold years. As a member of First Parish Unitarian Church, she was the sewing circle president, a Sunday school teacher, and the solicitor and collector of First Parish's endowment fund. In 1903, she was the chairman of Stow's Old Home Week's Finance Committee. Susan was a member of the Isaac Davis chapter of the Women's Relief Corps and worked with the Red Cross unit in Hudson during World War I. The Hudson News Enterprise wrote upon her death in 1927 that, quote, "Susan Lawrence was a woman of sterling worth and was for many years a prominent factor in the educational, social, and religious life of the town, thoroughly posted in its history and interested in its welfare," unquote.
Stow moved into the 20th century as a rural, open landscaped community with World War I, the Spanish flu, and women's suffrage on community's mind. Women were active in the town's 3 churches, ladies' aid societies, the Red Cross, the Stow Civic Club, the Grange, the Stow Women's Association, the Gleasondale Social Club, and others. The Hudson News Enterprise newspaper provided an excellent overview of Stow between 1918 and 1920. Everyday happenings were featured weekly under two column headings, Stow and Gleasondale. It is these two correspondents who give 21st century Stow a lifeline to the pulse of Stow and many of her ladies 100 years ago. This newspaper is available on the microfiche reader at the Hudson Public Library. 3 days were spent skimming nearly 600 pages, photographing every Stow and Gleasondale entry. There were numerous hilarious happenings. After reading every correspondent's weekly articles, there were two which exemplified Stow's women's suffrage sentiments. The first one was printed July 12, 1918. Stow, Red Letter Day. Under the magic of popular favor, the modest proposition to entertain on July 4th 25 soldier boys from Camp Devens in a very simple manner grew like Topsy into quite an elaborate affair. It grew beyond all thoughts of expectations of the proposer of the plan. There was a procession, games, sports, supper, and dancing. The 4th of July parade was described in detail. One float featured Lady Liberty and Columbia. In the Fuller Gleason Stow Historical Society photo collection, there is a 1918 photo of this float, What We Are Fighting For. Stow has a treasured image of women portraying their strong feelings for the right to vote. This float was designed and built in Gleasondale. One of the women on the horse-drawn float was Alfreda Gleason Fuller, age 32. She registered to vote on August 28, 1920. On February 14, 1919, Stow's Hudson News Enterprise correspondent wrote, "Women's rights is a question always agitated. As we look over Stow and see the home-loving, faithful mothers, this question seems settled. For the, quote, hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world," unquote. "The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world" is a quotation from Wendell Ross Wallace's 1865 poem, What Rules the World? This might have been submitted by Susan Proctor Lawrence, Stow's schoolteacher and librarian, who wrote anonymously for the newspaper. The 19th Amendment was ratified on August 18, 1920. Stow Selectmen Minutes recorded the 6 days and times during which all qualified Stow citizens could register to vote. In 1920, 171 women from Stow, Massachusetts registered to vote between August 14th and October 23rd. At the time, this represented 62% of eligible women out of the town's 1,100 residents. The women ranged in age from 22 to 81 years old. Numerous family groups registered. Examples of extended family groups include the Peck, Lewis, Staples, Lambert family, the Derby Priest family, the Warren Smith family, the Taylor McCarthy Byron family.
Linda Hathaway reading about Carrie Warren Smith, 1872-1952, a distant relative. Born in Stow, Carrie Warren Smith was a force to be reckoned with. She boarded teachers in her home, oversaw Stow's sewing units for the Smith College unit of the Red Cross, chaired Stow's second Red Cross War Fund, was a member of the Stow Civic Club and the Stow Women's Association, and with an efficient corps of helpers, canvassed the town for the Salvation Army drive. Her nephew, Franny Warren, wrote, "She was known as Aunt Carrie by nearly everybody and was active in many groups in town: church, grange, civic club, women's club, and garden club. She was very public-spirited. Whenever a cause needed a volunteer, she was there. Many times she got others to take part when they were backward about coming forward."
Bruce Fletcher reading Louisa Taylor McCarthy, 1877 to 1960. Born in England, Louisa was naturalized in 1907. She was active in the Gleasondale Episcopal Methodist Church and was the manager of the Gleasondale Mill Corporation boarding house. To people in Gleasondale, she was the midwife. The Hudson News Enterprise captured Gleasondale's thoughts about Louisa McCarthy on October 11, 1918. Quote, "The epidemic of Spanish influenza seems to be abating in this village. Nearly all of the sick ones are now convalescent. The Gleasondale people firmly believe that the deeds of the Good Samaritan were not over 2,000 years ago, but are still being done in this year of our Lord, 1918. Mrs. William McCarthy, with 9 of the family at the boarding house ill, took in 2 other sick ones to care for, one who had since died, even then at the point of death. Surely it is for such act of kindness that the 'well done' of the Master will be pronounced." Unquote. In her memoirs, Life in Gleasondale, 1910 to 1923, Marion Brown Weatherby wrote, quote, "Mrs. Louisa McCarthy was the person that helped people of the village in time of sickness." Unquote.
Ellen Sturgis reading about Harriet Gertrude Bird, born 1873, died 1965. Born in Stow, Harriet Bird acquired her father's 90-acre farm in 1902 and transformed it into a charitable home for horses. In 1903, Red Acre Farm opened with 1 old black horse. Harriet was the secretary for Boston Mayor Curley's Committee to Make Streets Safe for Animals in the Winter. She brought Boston workhorses home to Stow via train for 2 weeks of rest. During World War I, by authority of the federal government, she traveled among cavalry and artillery posts to see that the horses were properly fed and sheltered, and she was also responsible for Army veterinarians and cavalry sergeants having adequate supplies of medication in the service known as Red Star. Harriet was appointed in 1919 at the Stow Town meeting to be part of the town's Welcome Home Committee for Stow's servicemen. Following World War II, Harriet Bird built 11 homes, Red Acre Village, for veterans. During Harriet's illustrious career, she was also locally a member of the Stow Grange, the Stow Civic Club, the Stow Maynard and Concord Women's Clubs, and the Stow Garden Club. For her work with animals, Harriet was the director of the Massachusetts and New England Federation of Humane Societies, the founder and director of the Merwin Memorial Free Clinic for Animals in Alston, and was bestowed the American Humane's Outstanding Humanitarian Award in 1954. Stow's 170 women were a mighty force registering to vote in 1920. They listed their occupations as housewife, stenographer, burler, farrier, farmer, weaver, nurse, bookkeeper, postmaster, clerk, manager of a corporation boarding house, sewer, storekeeper, teacher, motor winder, box shop, cover topper, box shop, rubber maker, and librarian. Stow does not have the voting records from 1920. However, the November 3, 1920 Boston Globe published the voting results from every Massachusetts town and city and compared the results to the voting numbers of 1916. In 1916, 184 men voted in the federal election. In 1920, 365 men and women voted in the federal election.
There is no question that Stow's women gladly cast their votes on Election Day 1920.